Hey everybody, what's going on? I've got my daughter over there. She's singing. What's going on? It's a little bit after the holiday. Happy holidays, everybody. Well, I guess we're in the midst of in the middle of a bunch of different holidays here, and we're gonna have the chat. And we're right now. We are live to YouTube, LinkedIn, and to Facebook. Very interesting subject I want to talk about right now. I want to talk about pay transparency in job openings. And it's very interesting. We've seen a lot of movement in this recently. There's actually a lot of topics I want to talk about. I almost went, did a show last night, a little bit tired, and I had different things. I was kind of close to some topics. I don't know, Christmas. Obviously, this is the day after Christmas now, and we're about to go into the next day here. I saw this article. And it's very interesting. I've seen some things, some different postings on LinkedIn. Of course, we've had different things happening in the policy arena with Colorado, New York, and now California, Washington. There's a lot of things that are happening here. And I saw this thing here. This is in Fortune, headline, Joe Green, Matthew Boyle, and Bloomberg, December 19, 2022. Quote, employers are putting artificially low salaries on job postings to try to get around pay transparency laws. That's their headline, right? That's not my accusation. That's the headline in Fortune. And I'll link to these articles in the video description on YouTube. I mean, so it's very interesting. Like, what are you seeing out there if you're looking for a job or if you're into the job? Another thing here is I see this is sort of interesting right now. CNBC. December 4th, 2022, by Michaela Cohen. Quote, companies need to increase salary transparency or workers will quit. Very interesting. And basically they're saying something like about 5% will quit if they find out, quote, if they find out they're making less than their coworkers, unquote. That's really interesting. That's really interesting. So a lot of things are happening here. And I think we have to unpack this in several different ways. First of all, how prevalent do you think this is out there? Like, what do you think is going on in the marketplace that may be creating this situation? Number one. Number two is, if this is happening, why is it happening? Why? Yeah, like, Steve, it is late. It is late. It is late. I know. Well, I got off work and, we had dinner with the family and stuff, and I had some things thinking. I'm like, okay, well, I kind of want to talk about some things. And tomorrow, I'm probably going to do a show, and I kind of want to have that as its own thing. So, it's I always like to go with topics when I'm thinking about them. So I'm sort of thinking about this one, and I think it's very interesting. I think it's very timely because we're seeing a lot of discussion around this. There's a lot of discussion before about, the great resignation, quote unquote. And now we're seeing this pay transparency, and I've never really understood this, right? I mean, I do and I don't. Like, conceptually, I can see why this is sort of happened or transpired in the marketplace, if you will. But like, it doesn't make logical sense to me. I don't see how this works out really well. It was meaning like this. So I always found it very fascinating. Like, and again, this is maybe anecdotal, obviously, but the people I find on LinkedIn and stuff, they always talk about servant leader. You look and, do they always emblemize that? Do they always embody that? If you have to shout it from the rooftops that hard, I don't know. I'm not, and it's interesting, like, talking about the team. And then maybe someone dips out. They never told their team, what happened to the team? Get a promotion. Teams left there. Hey, what about the team, right? I find like loyalties, it seems like it's very one way. Sometimes in the corporate world, I don't get that. Whereas I'm more just straight up, this is what it is. And understanding that as, I'm an entrepreneur. I've always been an entrepreneur. That's what I'm comfortable with. And so I understand no matter where you're at, you always have to add value, right? If you run your own business, you have to add value to consumers. If you work for someone else, you have to add value to consumers. And obviously you have to add value to the company. It never ends, right? That's always the proposition. And so I've never been under any illusions with that. I'm totally cool with that. And I'm fine with that. That's not an issue. But I think that maybe some people are are confused about that. But at the same time, you have to look at the entire ecosystem, right? Interesting. Steve, greed is good, has been oversold. Okay, so we'll come back to that. That's maybe a little bit. That's sort of an interesting comment there. Let's table that for the second. And I'm still working with the lighting here. I'm not totally, I mean, I think I'm happier with it, but I'm not totally happy with that. Risk return fallacy. Okay. All right. Hold on a second. I think that companies have to be transparent when it comes to compensation, because at the end of the day, if you are sort of think about this logically, and if you know, of course, everybody wants to get the, you know, if you're a consumer, you want to get the most value for the least money. And I think it's probably the same from corporations. Everyone's trying to maximize, you know, value, maximize profits, you know, cut expenses, et cetera, et cetera. But at the same time, like, especially when there's a difficult market, a couple things. If you, let's say that you're willing to pay 100 to 200,000 for a position, but this is all hypothetical. First of all, I'm not alleging any facts, not casting aspersions, all for entertainment purposes only. Please check all disclaimers in the video description, and everything you do is at your own risk. Let's say you were willing to pay 100 to 200,000, depending on experience, et cetera, et cetera. Great. But somehow or another, someone advertises this role for 60 to 90 or 60 to 120. Let's just do it that, or 60 to 160, however you want to say it, whatever. At that top end, you're going to lose out. You have to think that it's in aggregate, things are generally worth what you pay for them. Maybe not, again, anecdotally, but in aggregate, taking over 100 candidates, 1,000 candidates, 10,000 candidates, things are roughly going to be worth what you pay for. If I go to a restaurant and I pay $20 for a meal versus $50 for a meal versus $100 for a meal versus $300 for a meal, you would expect to see an increase in quality and an increase in service for those higher price points. It may not be linear. There may be a one-off, but generally that's what you would expect. I think you'd have to assume that would be the same situation for the job market out there, right? Because if I'm willing to pay more, I can get higher level talent. That's just what it is. I mean, we see that in sports, we see that in vehicle, we see that in all kinds of stuff, right? You know, if it works for products, it's you know, you would expect the job market to be the same. And again, in aggregate, over a large data set. Okay, so if if it's potentially true that you're putting out artificially low benchmarks to, you know, give yourself room and negotiate whatever like that. If people are searching, I mean, it's no easier on job seekers than it is on job hires or HR departments. If you're, you know, sorting through or limiting searches to a certain amount, let's say that you're used to making a certain amount and you're only going to accept 150 or higher, 160 or higher, 200 or higher, whatever it is, you know, now you've lost that top, the whole, you know, Pareto principle, right? The 80-20 rule, you know, 20% of your workers or 80% of your profits. And you can use that for all kinds of different things. So if you lose that top 10%, 5%, 10, 20% of potential applicants, that's really not smart, right? I'd rather overshoot than undershoot. I'd rather overpay than underpay. I've always been that way. I don't understand. You have to pay for talent, period. You have to pay for quality, period. Your team is everything. It's everything, right? The idea that you could have whatever you want to call it, brand, process, everything is important. But at the end of the day, your team executes on everything else, right? So training, motivation, skill, all those things go into team. everything you're trying to do is driven by the team. Until we get to the point where you're fully automated, you're dealing with team. Let's see what Steve has to say about this. Invention trying to interesting. Okay. So I mean to try to not price things again. This maybe is my law and economics. This is maybe, you know, I was really, really, really good at law and economics, and I learned from some of the best in the world, in my opinion. And it's like, you know, Professor Robert Cooter of UC Berkeley, and of the textbook, I believe, Cooter and Ullen on law and economics, and of course, you know, reading Judge Posner and on and on. But putting all that aside, just think about it, commonsensical, right? If things are mispriced, you're going to have an inefficient market. That's not good. It just doesn't make sense, right? And I think that maybe some people feel like they can outsmart the market, and you know, again, it can happen here and there. I don't think that's a good bet in aggregate over time. And I think at the end, you end up fooling yourself, because if the position is worth 200, if you're willing to pay 200, but then you don't advertise 200, you are missing out on that talent that can then return those returns that you expect for paying out. And usually with professional services firms, it just depends. Everything's different, but you know, it depends on what it is and where, and what the cost overhead is and the client base, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But you'd expect like a 2 to 5x, right? So such to say that if you're willing to pay 20% more, and I've got to do the math, it's late, so I'm just totally doing this off the cuff here. If you're willing to pay 20% more, you may get an additional, I hope my math is right here, you know, 20 to 100% more. Actually, that would be like 40 to 100% more profits, or gross margin at least. That's probably the fairer way to say it, gross margin at least. And I'm probably wrong in that. I'd have to do the math and sit down and do the calculations and the Excel spreadsheets. But conceptually, you understand what I'm trying to say here, right? The employee's worth X. You have a 2 to 5x multiple on it in terms of gross margin. Therefore, there is a multiplier effect. Okay. So you're losing that additional margin. You're losing that additional revenue. You're losing that additional efficiency. Not to mention what's, you know, they've done research and studies on this too, which is to say that the top, I forget what it is, 10% of employees get, you know, so much more money, or just worth a lot more, right? These elite, you know, the elite talent in everything is just worth so much more. And we see that, and again, in, you know, creative endeavors and film and artistry and actors and actresses and athletes, and it's, you know, business, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Hedge fund world, venture fund world, all these things, right? And I think Steve's back to the bots. Okay. So I don't understand. To me, it's inefficient. It doesn't make any sense not to be transparent and to be very candid, if you will, with where you want that range to be. Even if you're, you know, willing to go a little lower, a little higher, or whatever. So I think that's the thing. The other thing is, and then there's the whole, like, now with these policies and laws being rolled out, the whole, you know, implications of that, right? I mean, are you compliant? Are you not compliant? And how do you be compliant? And that's very, very interesting. But you see, it's, to me, my sense of it, you know, again, just my own opinion and gut sense of it is there seemed to be a significant pushback. I don't want to qualify it more than that because I haven't done, you know, huge amounts of research on it. But there seemed to have been significant pushback from the business community on these points. Like, and I don't get it. Like, to me, it's like, you know, when the Colorado law got rolled out, It's like, okay, hey, for the purposes of Colorado, but then some people are like, oh, this applies to everyone, all states but Colorado, because they didn't want to deal with it. Well, now New York and California, if you're in like financial services, I mean, there's just so hard to avoid, so now you're gonna have to deal with that. So Washington as well. So like I don't see how serious multinationals, serious national companies, serious technology companies of any scale are going to be able to avoid that, right? So how do companies deal with this? And to me, you just have to be transparent. You have to be transparent, and that's the other thing too. If you're a company that preaches, transparency and treating the customer this way, well, how are you treating your employees? What level of what are you afraid of? Let's start with that. What are you afraid of? Why shouldn't there be pay transparency? Like in public companies, you have to disclose. Why shouldn't there be pay transparency in every company? What are you afraid of? To me, you're only afraid if you cannot defend it. If there's something that doesn't make sense, whether you're paying too much or too little, right? If you're paying value, if you're paying what that value is worth, it should be totally defensible. Right? I mean, or if it's pegged to market, pegged to metrics, whatever, it should be totally defensible. So if you're paying value, why would you not want to be transparent about it? I mean, what business leader can, in the comments below or right now on LinkedIn or YouTube or Facebook, how do you defend that? What is the alternative discussion? Why all the secrecy? I've never understood that. I'd see things like, again, I've been an entrepreneur most of my life. So if I wanted a job, if I wanted a client, if I wanted to sell something, I had to be, this is what it is. These are my rates, or this is what this widget costs, or whatever it is. And let's see here, Steve. Well, it ends up being the end result is unfairness would be the argument against system outcome, not system input. To me, it's like I just don't understand it. Do you feel like you're going to get some leverage? So, okay, I'm jumping ahead. And there was advice that was given, like, oh, hey, when you're in an interview, don't ask about the pay. Don't, that looks bad if you ask what the position pays, or you should know that. Like, what? That's a basic question. So a prospective employer can ask me a litany of 50 different things, or I can do 2, 3, 5, 7 rounds. I've seen things like 9 rounds of interviews. I can do, all these rounds of interviews, maybe fly out somewhere. I mean, Zoom in after Zoom in, triple interview, just crazy stuff. But I can't ask how much the position pays. That makes no sense whatsoever. That's a total waste of time to me for everybody involved. To me, I mean, are you just playing some games? You think you're going to out negotiate me or whatever? Just say what it is, or say what the range is. Be accurate in your range. If you don't know, then you don't know, but you have to know somewhat what you are expecting for this position and somewhat what you're willing to pay. And you have to let people know that, let the chips fall where they go from there. And you may be surprised and say, you know what? Maybe this position is a little bit more senior, but this person seems really great. And, we're willing to kind of do a training thing and mentor them up. Or, you know what, this person's really senior and we didn't really have the budget, but we'll figure out how to put this budget together and give it a shot and see what's going on. So but those are a little bit different questions. But the fundamental question of pay transparency, and of course, so now we're seeing with the CNBC article, it potentially it seems like there's some disruption out there, potential disruption, right? If about 5% of workers would quit if they find out that the coworkers making more, and there is constant competition. And I think some companies are sort of, I don't know, there seems to be this nervousness in the employer market right now. Like, oh, we're gonna, there's always competition. There's competition for new grads. There's always competition for top talent, and with the whole workforce, tight labor market, everything like that. But it is what it is. I mean, if prices are going up everywhere else, why wouldn't they go up there? If you're charging more for your business, if you're making record profits, right? I mean, again, this goes back to the whole thing. There isn't like two different. I mean, there's different subsets I get, but there is one economy. There's not like it's all tied together. If you're selling goods for X, 5 years ago, now today with inflation or whatever it is, or you're selling goods for the same good for 2x, well, someone's going to pay for that, right? And so it all goes, or they can't afford it, and it all goes back together. At the end of the day, in order to extract value, you have to add value. It's that simple. So yes, you can get very complicated. I can get out the formulas. We can have fun like that too. But at the end of the day, it's very simple. You have to add value. If your employees are adding value, if they're worth value, you have to pay them. And you should pay them what? Fair market value. It's simple. And why wouldn't you tell them that? If you don't tell them that, if I advertise, if I'm starting a track team or something like that, let's say I've got awesome sprinters. I'm covered for the 100. I'm covered for the 200. But I kind of need some milers out there. And I say, well, I'm looking for people that can either run a 400 or 1500. Those are two different races. You can have some overlap. Those are two pretty different races, right? You see the 200 and the 400 overlap. You see some overlap. And again, I'm not the track expert. I'm just throwing something out there that, conceptually. But because you'll see where I'm going with it. Let's say you push even farther. You want a 5,000 meter runner, right? You want a 5,000 meter, 5K runner. And you advertise that, I'm looking for someone 400 to 5K. Well, everyone you're advertising for the 400, that is not going to help you I would be really shocked if they're an elite 400 runner, if they're going to help you, unless they're just some super, super, superstar that's so far and above away everyone else. But I mean, I don't know that I can't think of anyone off the top of my head, and I follow sports pretty closely. So why are you advertising for that 400 runner? Because it's too disparate of a race from the 5K at an elite level. I'm not talking about someone in your neighborhood that's a good runner and can do, but I'm talking at an elite level, elite competitive level or professional level. That doesn't make sense, right? It's a different position, right? If I'm looking for a football team, I don't advertise, and I'm covered in all bases except for I need one wide receiver. I don't advertise for a wide receiver and a linebacker, a wide receiver and a lineman. It doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense, right? So similarly, you have to be transparent with your pay of what you're trying to achieve, or you're going to get different results. So, you know what I'm saying? It just doesn't make sense to me. There's so much more to talk about here. Yeah. Talking game theory pricing. Right. Yes. So, right. I'm very logical about how I look at this. Now, there's stuff going on. There's a lot of other things we can probably talk about tomorrow. There's stuff going on with, there's another one. Bloomberg. Let's cover this real quick. I'm just very curious out there what people are thinking. You know what I mean? Like, I didn't want to come out with and really do the whole talk show thing and get too, intense on either side. But I just think that it's very interesting out there, and I just don't get it. I just think it's another inefficiency of corporate America. Honestly, it doesn't make sense. Why the secrecy? If someone's making $1 million in your business and can defend it and can show why they make $1 million or why they should make $1 million, and what are you afraid of? Who cares? I'd be proud of that. That's awesome. Hey, guess what? This person's worth $1 million, and you could be too at some point, or 2 million, or 5 million, or 10 million, or 400,000, or 300,000, whatever it is. I wouldn't be afraid of that. Why would you be afraid of that? So here we go. Bloomberg. I'm going to wind this down here pretty quick. And this is, I think we've talked about it, right? December 19th, Jeff Green, Matthew Boyle, quote, employers are deflating salaries and job listings to keep pay down. Well, that doesn't sound super positive, right? What happened to the servant leadership? What happened to just transparency? What happened to all those principles and mission statements that the corporate leaders talk about? That's what I'm saying. When you do things like that, you don't understand how destructive that is to morale, in my opinion. And a lot of these things I see, like LinkedIn, I see like just people talking to them it's an echo chamber, right? GMs want to talk to GMs. Hey, yeah, look, and people like them and stuff like that, but maybe they don't like, the salesperson's post, or they won't answer that, or oh, that's, whatever, but if it's an owner, oh yeah, whole dealer principal, you know what I mean? Like, and it's anything. It could be the partner in a law firm, associated, it's just, you go on and on and on. Managing director and, in banking or consulting versus, the associate and the analyst or whatever. And I just feel like if you're this goes to everything. This goes to brand, right? This goes to communication. If you're going to sell it, you need to live it. If you're going to sell it, you need to live it. And it doesn't, this is one of the reasons I don't just like hammer on like fitness and stuff. I used to, I was a champion, right? I was a national champion, right? And I took third in the world and all that. But I'm in a different place in my life right now. I love that. And I need to get back in shape and do all that type of stuff. And obviously I have that. And I'm not saying I'm, but that's probably not the best analogy, but it sort of gets us a little bit, down the road a little bit, I think once a champion, always a champion. I have the knowledge and et cetera, et cetera. But I think part of it is like I'm doing different things in my life. Anyway, that's probably not even a great analogy, but at least it's a halfway analogy to kind of get some concepts on the table here. If you're going to sell it, you need to live it. As simple as that, right? Or else how do you? Oh, we have lost it. Oh, anyway, I'll wind it down. No video. I think somehow my camera went out, so I will wind it down here. Thank you all so much. I appreciate it. I look forward to your comments. I look forward to speaking to you tomorrow.